The Avengers always showcase an impressive array of abilities that rightfully should make bad guys quake in their little villain boots. Oh, Tony just made a giant repulsor blaster out of his nano armor. Oh, Ant-Man just became Giant Man. Oh, Thor harnessed lightning without his hammer and kicked Hela's butt. But I think for every awesome power we saw our heroes use, there was another ability that we didn't get to see. Today, I'm talking about all the superpowers the Avengers didn't use, but definitely had at one point that would have made their MCU appearances totally epic. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get into it right now. One of the biggest things that everyone knows about Iron Man is that the man who wears the suit is pretty reliant on technology. Tony Stark may be a genius billionaire playboy philanthropist without the suit on, but when he does decide to fight the forces of evil, he's mainly relying completely on the technology he's built. Well, the big question with that is, has Tony's embracing of technology ever evolved to an actual superpower? The answer is yes. This was mainly due to the Extremis storyline, but Tony once had the ability to actually control machines with just his mind. Yeah, the nanotech that Tony displays in Infinity War and Endgame is kind of similar, but the Extremis tech was much more advanced in the comics. He could do things as simple as make phone calls and move phones without touching it, or he could access satellite reconnaissance, emergency signals, certain frequencies, etc. just by thinking about it. He became a true technopath, and although we came a long way in the MCU from Iron Man's first appearance to his last, we never quite got to that next level. Again, we were certainly close though. Can you imagine Tony being able to have conversations with machines as well as humans? I mean, sure, he's lovable, but he has the tendency to annoy people he comes into contact with due to his mile-a-minute mouth. I imagine machines would be just as irritated if he could talk to them. He'd tell his printer to print something and it would just say out of ink. His thermostat would just keep his whole house frosty out of spite. His microwave would make sure to just warm the plate that his frozen burrito is on, but not the burrito itself, etc. But seriously, seeing Tony evolve into more of a machine than a man as he continually upgrades his tech would have been fascinating to see in the MCU. There was a funny moment in Infinity War where Thor says he can understand Groot because he took an elective in school that specifically taught Asgardians Groot language. And while that's hilarious and all, it also robs Thor of one of his core abilities that I think is vital to the character. Thor has something called the All-Tongue, and while I wish that meant he had a finely tuned palate that could distinguish sophisticated ingredients in fancy food dishes, it's actually something else. Thor is supposed to be able to understand every form of language and be able to respond back in whatever language the aliens or whatever are speaking in. Yeah, I know that it's just a million times easier for the movies to say everyone in the galaxy, as well as immortal figures like the Eternals, just all speak English so we can focus on other things like big superhero fights. But I mean, what are the chances everyone speaks one language when they've never been to Earth before? That's why the All-Tongue is such an important power. And one that I wish we would see more of, mostly because it would be a solid way to set up Thor's new journey in the MCU. Avengers Endgame was a goodbye for both Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, but Thor actually ended in a great spot to continue with more adventures. He basically wants to go to space and have more adventures in order to find his new destiny after giving up being king of Asgard. Highlighting the All-Tongue would make Thor an extremely vital character to the overall universe, as he could work to unite a bunch of different groups together in his space travels and prepare for whatever comes next. But now, that won't be happening. Okay, this one is just kind of hilarious. Everyone knows what Spider-Man's abilities are. Hey, there's even a whole song about it. He does whatever a spider can. You know what spiders do. They're incredibly strong, agile, sit in their little spider homes and develop complex web shooters to spin their webs, have an extra spider sense that unites them across the multiverse, as well as let them know when a human wants to smack them with a shoe. You know, what spiders do. But there's another rare power in Peter's arsenal that he hasn't busted out in the MCU or any Spider-Man movie yet, and that's his ability to talk with spiders. This is just one I want to see mainly because I wouldn't be surprised if the MCU's Peter's actually a little afraid of spiders. I mean, they're creepy on their own, and wouldn't that be something this human cookies and cream ice cream cone be a little frightened of? Like they give him the heebie-jeebies or something? Imagine if Peter develops this ability a bit more as he becomes a bit more tuned in with the grander multiverse around him and has full conversations with his eight-legged friends that help him in his superheroing. He could use an army of spiders to attack a bad guy or something, but thinking about it, that might be too creepy of a visual for the MCU. What do you think? What exactly did the super soldier serum do to Steve Rogers' body? We know the big stuff. It made him super strong, agile, and durable. I thought it also gave him the ability to know how to throw the shield with pinpoint accuracy where it always bounced back to him. But the Falcon and the Winter Soldier TV show proved that even normal humans like pre-serum John Walker and Sam Wilson could throw the shield almost with the exact same speed and accuracy. So this means that one of Cap's underrated powers wasn't utilized properly in the MCU. It's his enhanced eyesight. And look, I get it, being able to see things well doesn't sound as flashy as being a technopath, speaking the all-tongue, or talking to spiders, but it's also an incredibly useful power, especially for someone like Captain America. You remember that scene in Civil War when Tony was using his tech to predict Steve's fight patterns and come up with a defense? Well, it's not really shown or explained, but the super soldier serum allows Steve to basically do this as well. His enhanced vision allows him to process incoming visual stimuli much faster than a normal human and react accordingly. Again, they showcased this maybe a little bit, but never took time to fully explain that this was something Cap could do. And he never made a big deal about it. Classic Cap. The heart-shaped herb grants people the powers of the Black Panther, which basically boil down to strength, speed, agility, and durability. Add to that the super high-tech Black Panther suit, and you got yourself one superhero. T'Challa was a special figure in the MCU. He was a lot like Captain America, where the powers he showcased were pretty basic, but it was his demeanor, his leadership ability, and his heart that made him one of the best superheroes around. But there's a lot more hidden abilities that come with being the Black Panther that we didn't get a chance to see. In the comics, at one point, T'Challa was anointed the King of the Deceased, which not only granted him the power and the knowledge of all the past Black Panthers, but also allowed him to call the spirits of fallen warriors into battle. That's intense. I think whichever hero can summon an undead army automatically wins in terms of superheroing, don't you think? It's a game changer. Now, of course, tragically, we'll never get to see T'Challa do this, but who knows about Black Panthers in the future of the MCU? If Shuri sticks around long-term with the mantle, will she be able to harness this ability? That'd be interesting, as Shuri, the girl of science, suddenly has to grapple with armies of ghosts and mystical phenomena. How would that go? Alright, I'm just saying, how awesome would it be if in the middle of Doctor Strange doing jaw-dropping magic tricks, he turns around and busts out a judo chop or like the Black Widow leg neck flip thing or something? Come on, you know you want to see that. This one isn't a superpower per se, but it is an ability that Doctor Strange has that we haven't seen utilized in the MCU. Dr. Stephen Strange, on top of all his magical abilities, is also an expert martial artist. He's great at judo, so you wouldn't want to fight this guy in hand-to-hand combat. Man, how embarrassing would that be? Like, remember when Batroc the Leaper challenged Captain America to a fist fight? Imagine someone doing that to Doctor Strange, being all, "Oh, I bet you can't beat me without magic," and then proceeds to get their butt handed to them in a fist fight by the Sorcerer Supreme. He's also pretty efficient in weapons like swords and axes, because why not? When you look at Hulk, you get it, right? He's a big green rage monster that smashes things, so you wouldn't expect the Hulk to be able to see ghosts. That just doesn't quite mesh with his whole vibe, but it's true. Hulk has showcased that ability thanks to a complicated backstory, and honestly, that would be kind of a fascinating direction for the character to go. Like, sure, maybe the MCU wouldn't adapt it perfectly, but what if that's how they resolved the Professor Hulk situation in the MCU? After he became Professor Hulk, it looked like the Hulk personality was gone forever. But then in Shang-Chi, we saw normal Bruce Banner again, and in the She-Hulk trailer, we saw Professor Hulk again. So what's going on? Maybe the ghost of Hulk was able to appear to Bruce Banner and the two were able to have a conversation to work out their issues? Sure, it's a stretch, but I just really want to see those two talking more. Shang-Chi delivered an excellent Phase 4 origin story, and it's a safe bet to say that the character will be a major player in the MCU moving forward. But what does that mean for his powers? At the end of the first movie, Shang-Chi was able to gain control of the 10 rings, and the mystery of their origin will be explored in the sequel. But hopefully this means they will showcase a bit more of their powers from the comics. Yeah, the rings were great in the film, but they all had the same power and were basically used for energy blasts and force fields. Compare that to the comics, where the rings all have different abilities like the disintegration beams, sonic booms, altering molecular structure of matter, fire blast, mental telepathy, etc. That's a stark difference right there. Imagine the sequel as Shang-Chi unlocking the ring's abilities in a way his father never did. That would definitely be an interesting direction to go. So, Scarlet Witch has a resistance to the Phoenix Force, and that's obviously something we haven't seen in the MCU yet. But could we? Think about it. After 2 failed attempts to adapt the Dark Phoenix storyline, the MCU will soon start to incorporate the X-Men into its story. And would Kevin Feige be so bold in trying a 3rd time to introduce the Phoenix Force? I would say it's possible, mainly because of Scarlet Witch. Wanda is quickly becoming the most powerful being in the universe thanks to her growing chaos magic that allows her to manipulate reality itself. So what could possibly still be a threat to her? Well, that would be the Phoenix Force, one of those all-powerful forces in the universe that you do not want to mess with. Maybe by introducing the Phoenix Force as something that could potentially harm Scarlet Witch, with it ultimately failing, would be a good way to reintroduce the concept for future MCU movies and storylines. There's a lot of hidden powers that you may not know Groot has, but there's one I want to highlight in particular. Yes, I could mention his ability to control plants that aren't just on himself, but rather here's something shocking. You know Groot's a genius? Yeah, it's true. The big tree thing that likes to eat flowers off himself and drink fountain water is actually super duper smart. All members of Groot's race are exposed to the highly advanced photonic knowledge at a young age that increases intelligence. But it was also talked about how Groot's past consists of him receiving the finest education from a series of intelligent tutors. So yeah, the Vin Diesel-voiced character might be the smartest guardian of them all. Too bad he's sometimes a little hard to understand. Ant-Man is truly an amazing hero. Like, that superpower he possesses is probably one of the most vital and useful in all of the MCU, and it goes so much more beyond just shrinking and growing. Yes, we've seen him shrink down to the quantum realm size and get into all sorts of shenanigans, and we've seen him grow into Giant Man. But did you know that Giant Man is chump change compared to the size he can reach? It's incredible. One ability that we haven't seen Ant-Man use in the MCU is his ability to grow large enough to hop dimensions and go into the Overspace, which is a massive universe way bigger than our own and a plane of existence above all other realities, where Ant-Man can interact with massive cosmic entities. Now, I just really want to see a scene where Ant-Man is able to enter Overspace and be his typical Ant-Man self while interacting with beings as old as the universe. You'd think he'd show them a close-up magic trick? Probably, right? Captain Marvel has been established as one of the most powerful heroes in the whole universe. She's so strong that the writers had to effectively write her out of most of Endgame, since her being around would end things much quicker. Plus, with all that power, she has the responsibility to the entire universe and not just Earth, which means she's stretched pretty thin most of the time. And although she's insanely strong, the MCU has really just shown us how she can fly, punch, and blast away all her problems. But what about her ability to shape change? At one point in the comics, Carol Danvers merged with Mar-Vell, and it allowed her to be able to change her appearance from human to Kree. I think the MCU could take this one step farther by having Carol's powers continue to evolve and explore what it would be like if she kept leveling up and struggling to maintain control of all these new powers. Like, if she had the ability to shape change into anything, would she remain looking like Carol Danvers? If I had the shape-shifting ability, I'd make myself 4 inches taller and give myself Thor's muscles, his hair, his looks. Yeah, I just want to look like Thor. In the comics, thanks to a spell by Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch, Loki himself was finally able to lift Mjolnir. Now, is that something we could possibly see in the MCU? I would say right now, anything is possible. We know Loki will continue to fight against the evil Kang the Conqueror in Loki Season 2, and as he continues to prove that deep down he's really a good guy who just likes power, could it all eventually culminate in him being worthy enough to lift Thor's hammer? Think of how great of an ending to Loki's character arc that would be. After starting off flawed and troubled, Loki would eventually get to a spot where he's worthy enough to wield Mjolnir in battle, and maybe all his self-hatred would melt away. Sure, as soon as he'd lift it, his arrogance would suddenly shoot back up and make him not very worthy anymore, but hey, at least for a short time it would work, right? I think Bucky's arm is the most underutilized gadget in the MCU. Like, it should have a whole range of upgrades and abilities. In the comics, it can be a grappling hook, an EMP, an electrical weapon, a flamethrower, etc. But in the movies, Bucky just uses it to block bullets or punch things. That's such wasted potential right there. Are you telling me if you had a vibranium arm from Wakanda, you wouldn't immediately make it so it has all the latest weapons and upgrades? Like, what about that kinetic energy thing that's in the Black Panther suits? They can't put that in? They can't equip it with a flamethrower or something? All I'm saying is, the next time we see Bucky, I really hope we get to see some arm upgrades. We all know Drax can turn completely invisible at a moment's notice, but did you know he also should have telepathy? It's true. In the comics, Drax has a bit more powers than his brutish MCU counterpart has, and one of those is his ability to use telepathy. He once even engaged Thanos in a psychic battle, and the two enemies tried to fry each other with mind blasts. Wild. Imagine if in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Drax was somehow given the ability to read minds or use psychic powers. I don't know, that's something I don't think I could ever fully trust him with, don't you think? He'd absolutely run amok. But you know what they say, never say never. Just because we haven't seen any of these yet doesn't mean we won't. I think I presented some solid options here in terms of how to see these powers in the MCU, but only time will tell if they'll come to fruition. But come on, I totally want to see Chris Hemsworth's Thor speak in alien languages, don't you?